Nuanced podcast with Carmen Spaniola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Nuanced podcast, where we have interesting conversations with everyday folks about the mystery of life. And every once in a while, I send you a brief missive, a little dispatch from here on the farm on Insultion-speaking territory, not too far away from a small town known as Summerland, BC. I'm your host, Carmen Spaniola. Come in. Good morning.
Sparkly on the ramp here.
Oh, it's kind of frosty.
Yeah.
We're recording.
Oh, great. I was like, what is this fuzzy creature you're posting? Okay.
It's got a magnet on it.
Okay, so I take the back off.
Yeah.
And then, okay. Let's see. This is a nifty little setup. Get ready. Okay. See ya later. It wasn't too slippery, but ooh, as I say that.
Yeah. My penguin walk down, little waddle.
Yes.
How did you sleep?
I slept well. I was dreaming this morning of I'm trying to remember my dreams more.
Oh.
So I've been trying to say a key word out loud,
Yes.
even though I probably sound a little loony. Is that I was like lift. So I was dreaming about being in a large huge industrial or like institutional building. Like I went to SFU, so it reminded me of the SFU campus, which is like huge concrete. It's like used as the facility of the like CIA and X-Files. Okay. Like that is the location. So I'm dreaming of a place like that. And my brother is there and my niece, who's a tiny baby. And I'm holding her and my brother's like, don't hold her like that. And I'm like, but we gotta get out of here. Like it's one of these dreams.
Okay.
And then we're trying to get into an elevator, but every time we approach the door, it's not just that the elevator is sinking, it's that the whole building is sinking, so we can't get in the lift.
Yeah.
So we're running up the stairs to try to catch so that we can have more space to get in to the elevator before it closes down. Like
right.
It's sinking. What does that
It
mean?
all just sounds, yeah, exactly. What does that mean?
What does it all mean? Anyway.
What does it all mean?
But
okay, good
my
segue.
little baby niece.
Oh, and what was, you're like protecting the innocent and the inner child,
I suppose.
the lineage,
Yeah.
futurity
Might
itself.
be my first time dreaming of her, so that's kind of sweet, isn't it?
Because she is just a little baby in your life.
She's tiny.
Yeah. Okay, so segue. I don't record intros and outros to dispatches, so we have to tell everybody who you are.
Oh, right.
So Alysha's here for the dispatch. Yeah, here we're going over the gate here. Did I tell you I go over the gate like this because I'm practicing for getting on a horse?
Oh,
Yeah.
So you're imagining the
Yeah,
here's
exactly.
the stirrup.
So I'm doing it that way.
Okay, and now I'm mounting the horse.
There you are.
And now I'm getting off the horse. Probably not. Like
That was a little bit of a trickster kind of way to get off a horse. Trick rider. Okay, so Alysha, you're here helping me do some choring,
Yes.
and you're here helping us on the land. And I could just cut to the chase and tell everyone that my grand scheme is that I'm trying to adopt you as an older sister for V, our kid.
Yeah.
And we're trying to basically make you V's consigliere, as V will be inheritor of this land. And so we want to create a sort of queer sanctuary here with you as the sort of keystone.
Keystone species.
Yes, exactly. That's my dream. But of course, you're your own person with your own hopes and dreams and your own, life and your own storyline.
Yeah.
So maybe introduce the folks. Who are you, Alysha? What identities do you lead with?
Well, I am a settler to this place. I am a proud dyke artist, friend, lover, and you and I met probably a little over 10 years ago in one of my roles.
Fence is hot, remember,
Okay,
so
thank you.
we'll just go through.
No electric fence action today. There we go. Working with kiddos, which is the thing that I do. So I work with artists and children making art, artists healing their inner child,
That's so awesome.
And I'm also a guide in the Nuanced network. So
Oh yeah, there we go. And so partly in that role,
yeah.
and maybe in other things too, you've gone on quest with me and Ruben.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's been a bunch of environments where you've seen me do land acknowledgements. And you came across this article and were like, well, I really want to talk to you about that, because in the Nuanced network, whenever a new guide comes on, I'm always saying like, okay, you're going to have your own style, you're going to have your own zhuzh, but every session in the network, people can expect like 3 or 4 things. The first thing is we're going to do a land acknowledgement, even though we might be meeting for like attachment jam, or we might be meeting for a numinous like tutorial where I'm doing 1-card oracle readings, or it could be anything. But we're always going to have a land acknowledgement. We're always going to have centering practice. We're always going to have, at some point, and usually within the first 20 minutes, we're going to mention systems of oppression, capitalism, patriarchy, imperialism, etc. So no matter, even if we're doing witchcraft power hour, like you just guided, making, decorating ritual matchboxes, which is so awesome, by the way, we're going to have a land acknowledgement. And so you've also done my facilitation training, so you have a bit of a sense of my ethos around that, why that's important to me. So you've seen land acknowledgements as done by me, white settler Carmen, in multiple contexts, and then you had an idea that we should talk about it because you came across an article, or you were talking to someone?
Well, I had been thinking about it more, because in the facilitation training we get more chances to practice leading a land acknowledgement. And so seeing my peers practice it and also doing the training had me coming to calls more often, which I've been in the network for more than 4 years now. So it's like seeing the land acknowledgements so regularly in this context, it got me thinking about when and how and why we acknowledge the land. And what I've appreciated about the way that we go about that in the network is basically the land acknowledgement involves whoever is holding the space, whoever's facilitating, usually you, but also the other guides, to say, here's the land that I'm calling in from and my relationship to that land. And inviting people that are on a call to take a moment to acknowledge for themselves where they are, and maybe to place it in the chat so we can all track that together. But it's actually pausing, like beginning whatever we're about to do by giving our attention to where we are and who we are to that place, which I really...
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Here they are.
Yeah, and they're looking at us, so I just like to
make sure
acknowledge them with a hello and go up to them. V is wanting me to do this more too, because I don't want to just be like the cafeteria lady for them. We want to not have them just be like, oh, the only thing you're good for is some food. Hey, Paul.
I also come for visits.
Yeah. Hi.
I'm not on a first name basis with everybody yet, so
this is Bo.
Yeah.
And he's 14. And even though he's the oldest, he's lowest in the pecking order and he hates it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's got some, you can see he's like pretty battered up. So he's got a wound right here.
Yeah.
Because they're all geldings, so they get into it. And he lets them know, I don't like it when you push me around. Here comes Skaha.
Mm-hmm.
And Skaha is the youngest, even though he's the tallest. And he's also, I would say, the biggest shit disturber.
Yeah.
And see, he's got a wound right under his eye. You know why? Because he gets into it, don't ya? Yeah. And then the other one, the short, chubby one, stocky, let's say, is Reverie. And he is middle in age, but he is, he had his own herd.
Yeah.
When he was just like 3 years old. So he's an important guy. He's the big boss man. And so he, in herds, it's not actually that the lead stallion is out in front in a herd. He's actually in the back of a herd pushing them along. It's actually the lead mare who leads the herd where they're going to go. So he doesn't have a mare to work with, so he's got to do all the jobs, basically working dad. And so he pushes them around. So what I would say is, obviously, like, they're very friendly, but you got to watch your back, because as soon as Reverie moves his feet, they're all going to be watching him, and they're going to move their feet too. Yeah. Okay. So if you're right in front of them, you're in the beeline, as it were. Okay, I'm sorry. I just wanted to do protocol there.
Of course. Okay, so we're gathering the nets first, and then we take them out to the hay?
Yeah, exactly. So what I do is I gather the nets, and then I actually start making their mash right away, because it takes like 20 minutes for it to soften. So I come out and get the nets, then I make the mash, and then I fill the nets while the mash is softening. And I also bash their water for them when it's iced over like this.
Ooh.
Oh, it's not too bad.
Just a thin crust of ice.
Just enough to feel refreshed.
Would you like ice water?
Part of, we talk about ingestion behaviors in contact nutrition. And one of the things is they, they've eaten through their food all night, and they know that food is coming, and so they're particularly agitated right now. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, see, they're kind of agitated right now. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go and get some hay, and I'm going to quickly bring it back out after I do the mash, so that they free feed a little bit. It's just like scattered around, so they're just kind of foraging, and then they're like distracted. They're not standing at the fence staring at me and getting annoyed at each other, waiting for the food. So it's part of the collect before you direct kind of protocol with them.
I get hangry, I get it.
Yeah, exactly. And put a pinch of salt in each of those. Okay. And then this is my hot water that is steeping rose hips in it right now. Only the best.
Your chef sensibilities come out even for the horses.
That's right.
Yeah, I mistook that for your hydration, but in fact it's tea for the horses.
Absolutely not.
I should know better. I know that you're against drinking water.
Yeah. I drink fluid, just not water. But clearly there must be water in the things that I drink, or milk. That's my other go-to. I don't like that milk has gotten such a stigma. Yeah, just pop that there. Okay, let me just fluff some of the hay. Okay, we're going to leave some of this to do the nets, at least half of it. So one of these we're going to pop out. Okay. And then that'll need to get fluffed into nets in a bit, but I'll take these out. So here, what you'll do is we want at least 6 nets.
Yeah.
So this flake, which is like 20 pounds,
Oh, this is all coming back to me. So
Yeah.
we go around
Yeah.
here.
And now there's been little bits of plastic sometimes in this order of hay we've gotten.
Okay.
So you want to like pull it apart so they can get it out of the nets, and then just do some quality control.
Okay.
You know, you buy all this hay, but you can't see inside every single one. So you're just like, oh yeah, that looks okay. But then it's like
rope and stuff. Like what kind of plastic?
one I think was like row cover
Oh,
or something, and also little bits of this twine, like this baling twine.
Yeah.
And it's usually just like small enough amounts that they could eat it, which is, we don't want that.
Not ideal.
No. Okay,
Okay.
so you do those nets, and then I'll be right back. Reverie is the one who's most sensitive in his rear end. So just so you know, when you go in with nets, and the trimmer was just here, and she accidentally like touched his butt or something, and he tried to kick her like 2 times. So that was just a couple days ago. So he's just a little extra sensitive about needing space around his butt. Okay?
Okay.
So try to cross in front of his shoulders as much as you can.
Are these looking okay? They're not maybe all so even.
Yeah.
A little thin.
Okay, so please continue.
So, yeah, I guess thinking of how and when a land acknowledgement practice, I guess I've appreciated the moments when you've reminded participants of the difference of it being, I guess in public in-person events, I find there can be a tendency and for the land acknowledgements to be, sometimes they can be rushed as like let's get this over with. You know, I'm in my early 30s, so most of my adult life, of the political landscape of the spaces I've been in, I've heard land acknowledgements my whole adult life. So sometimes they're rushed and just sort of this, get it out of the way before we watch this batch of experimental films or whatever.
Okay.
And then sometimes they can be really long and detailed and kind of centering a lot of feelings of the person doing the land acknowledgement. Like there's a lot of emotion and story about them coming to terms with their position within settler colonialism. And then in the network I've appreciated, because everyone is coming from different places and contexts, that you're also having to distinguish between the centering practice. So this is not the pause and look out and look at a nice tree and feel happy about it.
Right. Let this be relaxing, this land acknowledgement.
Yes. But that often it is resourcing to us to just literally pause, to zoom out from this rush that we can find ourselves in, to say, oh, wait, where am I? But that, so there's the aspect of like acknowledging where you are, to like, what is the land where you are, kind of, what attention is it asking of you today? But then also to like name specifically the where you are. What is the name of the place in the language of the people who've been there, and what are your responsibilities there? But then we go into whatever it is that we're there to do, whether it's crafting or attachment or massage or whatever it is. But yeah, there's often like a range of experiences with land acknowledgements that people are coming in with. I think, should I be following you or heading up?
You can we'll just stick close so I can hear you. But I'll do these two and then we'll go up to the next one. Well, I read the article you sent me. Can you tell me a little more about who wrote it?
So Kilsalem is a Squamish writer and community member who
we'll grab your nets.
Receive their updates in my email inbox, and the article was, describing when land acknowledgements are particularly useful. And what I was thinking with was, there are specific contexts where, like, if a meeting or a group of people are together to discuss the context, it is land use and like the assumed settler access to land, then it's particularly important to begin with telling the truth about whose land it is and what we're going for here, if that's true. But I mean, we live in a place, you and I were both born in this place that is literally called British Columbus land.
Yeah.
And we live in this time where the provincial government is like signaling that they, care about Indigenous rights by legislating UNDRIP, and then right away bringing, militarized police force to displace Wet'suwet'en land defenders. And now they're like, well, I know we said we were going to legislate UNDRIP, but turns out we don't want to piss off any settler landowners, so we're actually going to amend that now.
Right. Yeah.
We don't want to signal too hard.
It's kind of whiplashy how quickly they are shifting with sort of who has trending power in terms of mind share or like cultural zeitgeist.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting time to be alive when they are like, oh, looks like we've got a bit of a hard shift to the right. We better be more moderate. And then, oh, look, something has happened. And it's more popular for us to appear as though we are tracking, human rights and indigenous sovereignty. And then you get these little actions, and it really is sort of placating the masses, right?
And like, I'm a part of those masses. Like, I also want to say, like, part of my desire to bring up how they operate in the network is that I'm really trying to balance this difficult contradiction between how and when the skills and tools that I've been able to learn with and from you have resourced my body and spirit to be able to show up to the difficult and necessary transitions that our earth and our communities are going through, where, what does it actually mean to participate in Indigenous sovereignty or land back, and how do I, as a white-bodied settler person, arrive to that task unclean, burdened by this,
right?
And being able to like self-regulate and know what gifts I'm here with.
Yeah, not to collapse into some kind of shame response.
Yeah.
Where you're overcompensating or.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was an interesting part. Okay, can you just say a little bit more about the writer? What's their name again? Kilsalem.
Yeah.
Are they on the Canadian side or the American side of the border?
Like based in BC. Like
There
in
are
the
based in.
Lower
Okay. And are they? What's their context? Are they also an artist? Or are they working in?
They work for the Squamish Nation.
Oh, okay.
Doing policy work.
Okay.
I've also shared virtual and in-person space with them, like on dance floors and
right. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And at community events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things, so it's an excellent article, especially because it's so, it's short. It says a lot in a very small area, but I think it also implies that you've kind of been around Vancouver since the Olympics in 2010, and that you're a person, and I don't know more, exactly, and that you live in a Canadian West Coast context where we have, we're the last area that was subject to conquest. So the nations here are, they still have living memory of potlatches and things like that being banned, and how they did it surreptitiously and that sort of thing. So contact happened here last, and so these questions are alive in a different kind of way, and in what we call Canada, there was the Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearings, public hearings that traveled the country. So there were opportunities for people to engage in this topic, settler and Indigenous alike. And so they said there's like three contexts in which these land acknowledgements make sense. I'm gonna get loud. Maybe I will give you some things. These each have scoops in them, and they need scoops.
One each in the.
Yeah, exactly. And this one too. And that one. So one was if it's like a government or institution context. The Olympics, of course. The other one was when there's an actual land-related issue, like land planning or real estate development or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the other one was like, what was it? It was like formal, where there is an actual ability to implement a policy or make policy change. Those are kind of like the three kind of main baskets. And then they were saying like, but not so much when it's just an informal gathering of people, because then there can just be, it can be prolonged and there can be ritualized awkwardness.
Yes.
Which I loved that phrase because, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I want to chime in because I feel like an example of this, and I'm struggling to, so one of my jobs is facilitating in schools, and I like with art programs, but also with kind of like SOGI, so sexual orientation, gender identity topics. And we do a land acknowledgement as part of our facilitation. And each morning in the public schools in BC now, they do a land acknowledgement on the announcements.
Oh.
And so we have it in our plan for the day to do a land acknowledgement, but then we've just heard one on the announcements read by children of peers in their school.
Yeah.
So we pivoted and we said, why do we do a land acknowledgement? And a young person, like 11 years old, 10 or 11 years old, like clearly had the provocative look in their eye, looked right up at me and said, because we have to.
Oh.
And I think children are a good gauge of where we're at. And so that ritualized awkwardness, or that we do this because we have to, it's like seeding this resistance. And as we see greater and greater conservative and fascist movement building, I do think that public schools are so under-resourced, and so they're like, oh God, okay, well, we'll just do the land acknowledgements every morning, and we'll say the exact script, and we'll never veer off from it, and we'll always have checked that box.
Right.
The children are learning that.
Right.
They're learning the box checking, not the deeper understanding of the policy implications of how the public school system has been a tool of genocide and colonization.
Yeah.
They're 11 years old. They're and of so many different family and cultural contexts. But that all they're learning as a repeated daily practice is we have to acknowledge on this script every day. Yeah.
Oh, it's such a painful, well, especially as somebody who has been lucky enough to have some really beautiful, here's some beautiful acknowledgements from around the world. And then territorial welcomes, which of course, and they say in the article, those are different from land acknowledgements. And so those do tend to be more poetic and beautiful, and also sometimes very challenging.
Because they're coming from relationship to land and culture.
Exactly.
As opposed to the acknowledgement.
Yeah.
Which
and so
there's
that makes me so sad for these kids. It makes me sad for the teachers, the ones who wish they could teach in a more ecosystemic way and in a more free political atmosphere where they could actually teach what stewardship means. Okay, here, look how good they're being. There you go, boys. Here you go, back up. Good boy.
This smells good.
Here you go, Bo. Okay, you can just drop that in there. Good boy. Okay, so that's
Munching
fascinating because I had so many questions about what is the context, because one of the things I've realized moving to a rural area, which is, I grew up in rural Canada, outside of a small town in kind of on the edge of a place that was already nowhere, and so here I am again, now 50, and I'm realizing just how my assumed perspective, I didn't realize how urban I was. Yeah. And so now that I'm in the rural context, I'm like, oh yeah, no, those are still needed. We still need land acknowledgements for sure. Yeah. But yeah, how we do them is, super important. So I can actually think of more contexts in which land acknowledgements are appropriate, and I think an educational context is one of them. Yeah. So, however, now that you're talking like that, it's like, oh, I consider the Numinous Network an educational context, because one of the through lines we're doing is we're trying to not only teach people about collapse, not only teach people about self-regulation and co-regulation. We're trying to teach them about collapse and also about power and the interweaving of those two things. And so I think that's what distinguishes it. I don't think our educational system is designed to teach people about power. In fact, it's designed to invisibilize it in many ways. And the author used the word numbing, right? You hear it all the time and it's numbing. And I think, yeah, absolutely. I can see how there's no government in the world that would be upset that the children are becoming numb to land acknowledgements, right? Yeah. All right.
Are we walking back?
Yeah, we can go the long way because then we don't have to go up the steep hill. So, you know, I think in the context of the Numinous Network, it is an educational environment in that kind of way, because we're trying to teach people about how oppressive power systems create freeze and numbness in our system. We're trying to help people gently mobilize. And so the thing about that, though, is that I'm doing this in a health and wellness context where the potential for cultural appropriation and the potential for the anesthetizing effects of a land acknowledgement are extremely high. And so, you know, not every single guide, but most guides have gone through my facilitation training now where, you know, in level 1, people are reading Tuck-in Wang. Yang. Tuck and Yang. Decolonization is not a metaphor. And, you know, we all read this 40-page paper, and then I ask, okay, here's our discussion about it. Please summarize for me in one sentence what this paper is about. It's right in the title. You can do it in one sentence. And it's that decolonization means nothing short of land back. And so there's no such thing as decolonizing yoga unless what you're saying is, and if, you know, whoever's lineage I'm speaking from, or whatever place I'm on, if I truly believe in Indigenous sovereignty and they said, sorry, you can't have the internet anymore unless you pay us a tax or something, if they did something that comes like exactly from the settler colonial nightmare, then if you truly believe in it, you have to say, okay, you know, okay, this is sovereignty. Oh, look at the ducks.
Oh, waddle. Waddle, waddle.
Let's walk slow, so not
oh
so
God,
slow that
a
we
lot of them.
Yeah.
What is the word for a group of ducks? Not a gaggle, but
that's geese. Ducks. Yeah, what is a group of ducks?
Oh.
I feel like we should know this. I feel like we learned this in nursery school.
Well, that's a great example where even within English-speaking land-based contexts, we lose words that connect us to place. But
yeah, totally.
I'm not gonna dwell on that fact because I continue to want to practice disobedience to English. But that, like, already right now, the network in these amazing 5 years, the reason it is possible is because there are lands that are being, like, there is presumed and forced access to the, like, data servers that allow all of these Zoom calls and that allow, you know, these hosts, like tech as an empire has
infiltrated every continent, and we can,
But so I guess my like sticky tangle with the land acknowledgements, or my like learning edge right now, is this sense of, if I'm repeating this multiple times a week, you know, can my land acknowledgement be deepening and bettering my knowledge of the names of the place where I am and who and how Indigenous people to that place are, you know, asserting their sovereignty and participating however I can, and or like looking out and being like, ah, yes, the trees are swaying in the breeze. I've acknowledged the land, and not acknowledge the, you know, the concrete foundation that was poured, and the clear cut that happened, that assumed access that allows my housing to be there. Wow.
There they go.
There go the ducks.
Yeah, I know. It's like so tricky, but I also I actually think the ritualized awkwardness of you grappling with that is so important, because I don't want people to sit comfortably in settler identity.
Exactly.
And my settler identity is very important to me.
Yeah.
I sort of never want to be comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So I still, after having done land acknowledgements almost daily for 5 years, sometimes 3 times
Public
in a
and
row.
daily,
Yeah, public and daily.
Yeah.
I still stumble over my words and have to do exactly what you're saying. It's like, yeah, I want to be in tune. Sometimes I do have to just think of the context of this call, and how is my land acknowledgement relevant to the context of this call?
Yeah.
And sometimes it is about like, wow, I am out of sync with what's happening, and sometimes it is weather, and sometimes it's, recently a member who lives not close, but within a few hours of me, said a very important elder and knowledge keeper of the South Okanagan people has died. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
And so then I got to go, oh, the people who are traveling, who are driving across, who are on the highways right now, are going to this funeral.
Yeah.
And these people, I don't know them, but I'm daily in gratitude and daily in acknowledgement of my responsibility to be a good neighbor and a advocate. And so they're grieving right now. That is important for me to know, and for me to walk even more gently on the land. But I think the ritualized awkwardness is actually it's the best part of that article, because I think it should be very destabilizing when we do the land acknowledgement. Yeah, it should be very unsettling. And and I think that tendency to, orient towards what's happening in the season and all of that, that's a very difficult one to kind of, teach, guide. You do have to model enough times to be like, this is not a somatic practice. Yeah. This is genuinely, one of the things I've been doing lately is saying I'm trying to imagine Indigenous sovereignty on the land where I am, not in the distant future, but in the next year or 2 years or 3 years. So what might that look like, and how can I participate in that? So not just me learning the names, but I want language revitalization for the Indigenous folks here. I should be tracking and amplifying what's happening with the language house and Tzotzil language house, and I should be, there's these things that I'm like, I like doing that. I should do that. And when I think about Trout Creek through here, it's it would be great for there to be salmon back in Trout Creek again. Yeah. But not just put that in my sort of fantasy timelessness part of my brain, but in an actual okay, so I'm scanning for opportunities for interfacing with the matriarchs who are working on restoring salmon in these waterways. That is a personal practice that I think we can try to expose people to, and kind of to a certain extent we do just sort of have to hope that a bunch of these people are not in the West Coast Canada, I've attended the live hearings context, and so they're kind of they're coming across the land acknowledgement once a month or once a week when they're in the network, and hopefully they're seeing that it's not like a public school announcement that's just wah 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 wah, and hopefully they are seeing that there is a relationship to how we're trying to highlight power, but it's not always going to work. It's not always going to land that way. Yeah. But I think that it's I think it's important I still think for our context it's important because white lady spirituality tends to turn everything into a feel-good exercise.
That's right. I am a recovering empowerment addict myself. And I think that, like, the contradiction, though, that I feel called is that, like, when we started talking about it and how we know each other, it's like you want this land to be bequeathed to your settler child. So how do you step? It's like,
okay,
feels
here,
like it's
let me tell you the story though. What I've said to V, and maybe I haven't said to you, is part of your stewardship of V is that someday V will be hopefully standing in front of an Indigenous elder from this nation and saying, I know this land is yours. And, you know, my parents have gone, they've done everything they could in the last 30 years to revitalize this land. And can I stay? Or can I stay on some of it? Well, because this land just right behind us is Penticton Indian land. And we would love to see the wild horses have a wildlife corridor. And so one of the things we're doing is, you know, telling all of our neighbors who've hated the wild horses because they come in and they like trample on their gardens and stuff. And we say, like, actually, they've literally been here since before the Ice Age. They left and then they came back. This is not a settler species that just arrived with the Spanish. They were here first and then they were essentially extirpated, but now they're back. And this is, you know, we have our neighbor over there, Jack, like he's so into grasses and brooms and stuff like that. And it's like, well, then you should care about the horses because they're an incredible part of this ecosystem. And he's like, oh, so this is like a rescue kind of operation. I'm like, yes, Jack, this is like a rescue and conservation. So at some point when we die, the expectation is that we will have created enough relationship with the Penticton Indian band, and they will recognize that we've been trying to protect the wild horse herds and their corridor, and that you're going to help fortify V's like literal ritualized awkwardness, so that when V says, is it okay if I stay, the hope, though not guarantee, is that they'll say, yeah, you've been a good neighbor to us and we like the way you've stewarded this land, and like, yeah, you can lease it for 100 years for $1 or whatever. So there's gonna be a point, maybe in our lifetime, but probably in V's lifetime, where this question of how much do settlers pay to stay, or how do settlers relate to the nation, and we're relating nation to nation. And in that case, again, we hope that they say, yeah, you've been good, like you can stay. But that might not be the case, and so maybe V will have to go. But it assumes you don't have to go. So it's like you're talking about the 30-year horizon and the 1-year horizon in the acknowledgement, where it's like, what if that conversation happened a year from now? And it's about we instead of V. Yeah, I mean, it would be the same conversation, wouldn't it? We'd be like just as fucked as we were when we were renting in Victoria. Yes. So it's kind of no difference to us. I shouldn't say no difference. This is a really great opportunity, but it may not be an opportunity that we get to have. And so this is like moving the time horizon to how can I participate in land back initiatives to a year or 2 years, knowing how oppressive systems exist. I highly doubt we'll be in the position you're talking about in a year, but it could happen. But if we start with, even with instruction taught in schools, just something that simple. But it's like, how can we as settler people in relationship to each other, like address and heal the fear of landlords that has come through us for so many generations. And to treat the host nations like landlords and to try to sweeten the deal for them so that they want to keep us is still settler colonial mentality to me. So it's like, I don't think they're going to want to do the harder thing, which is actually try to participate in solidarity and friendship and awkward everythings. And never presume access or never presume futurity. Because collapse has already occurred for them. Like that type of humility and embracing
the very high stakes of a no.
Yeah, totally.
But
I think one of the things, so I'm hearing what you're saying, and I hope I'm not coming across as presuming that the Indigenous nations would like want to displace us or want to be colonial landlord in the same way that we've experienced. I'm speaking to that mainly because of what's being experienced in Tsawwassen and with the like kind of huge
property rights.
Yeah, property rights issue that is really being instigated by like a few very right-wing conservative people trying to stoke the fears.
Yeah.
And my perspective is that, yeah, that could happen, but it's probably not going to happen because, as you say, there's a colonial imperialist mindset that says it's scarcity based, I guess is a way we could say it without trying to sound too love and light about it. But I genuinely feel that what we are trying to do with our like nervous system regulation, with our ritualized awkwardness, with satisfiability and enoughness is be prepared to essentially be nomadic because of collapse for whatever reason. And that we would all be in that together. Like we could be nomadic because of wildfire coming through and just this place not being worth like staying because it's so dangerous. You know, we could be displaced because of Indigenous desires to do something here. We could be displaced because of white development here. We could be displaced because the government infrastructure breaks down. We can't have clean water anymore. We could be displaced by a data center. There's a million ways in which we could, and that's just literally the story of Homo sapiens, is to move with land and with weather and with herds and food possibility. And so I would love for us to not have to do that because I have this multiply disabled child with very low energy capacity. And so it'd be great if we could stay. And in order for us to stay, we do have to have relationship. We do have to, so we kind of joke in our house, like, because we took some instruction language lessons. And so, you know, without using it all the time, you forget a lot of the important ones, but we know like ki, which is yes, and loot, which is no. And the way that the young man teaching it, he would be like thumbs down and you go loot, like it was very like no. And so in our house, when something bad happens, Ruben and I will go loot and we like do this sort of thing. But you know, a lot of people don't know that. Even a lot of Syilx people don't know that, sadly. And it sort of feels like, okay, well, as a person who is a lover of language, and I love how language arises from a place, I would like to participate in that. And I would like to share that with my child. And I would like to have that point of connection where if I walk up to a Syilx person and say, why, they know that I'm saying hello, you know, and that is a kind of relationship that really does take a lifetime of becoming the person you need to be able to tolerate the awkwardness of that and to tolerate the ambiguities of what our relationship is. And again, this is why I feel like what we're doing in the network is preparing people to be able to tolerate discomfort and tolerate a no. And in great measure because we've practiced our yeses and our nos, and we've practiced our clarity about those things. And so we're not going to emotionally and psychologically collapse. I mean, I just moved. Let me tell you, I would be stressed if they were like, yeah, we're turning this into a wild horse preserve or something and we need for you to leave, or we need, 50% of it back. I don't think that's going to happen, and I don't want to frame that. But if it did, I've been working on becoming the person I need to be in order to tolerate that for, 10 years. So that's maybe not easy to convey, but there's a kind of way of being that takes a lifetime to just kind of presence, I guess. And what my hope is like, you would be presencing that for V, and you're presencing that for us, and you're helping us to kind of, touch finger the wounds of settler colonialism and be like, yeah, but are you really serious about that? And maybe because I have been displaced recently, I'm kind of like, yeah, sure, whatever. Like, like I would love it if it were not so, but it is, that I think is a really important thing. So let us be clear. It could be it could be us, but at some point I may be standing in front of an Indigenous elder and I'll have to say, my name is Carmen. These are my people. These are my Indigenous teachers, like I'm not in a lineage, but I've been in relationship with Leonard George, son of Chief Dan George, or with Elder Norman Ratasket, or with Monique Graysmith, or whoever it is that I am so indebted to for pointing out in very awkward, very painful ways. Hey, here's the reality and the nature of our relationship here is like you're assuming access, or you're assuming ownership, you're assuming you can be here. Yeah. And I am trying really hard to not assume that. Yeah. And I am trying really hard to demonstrate in ways like from the horses to the cleanup of the plastics here, that I'm no better than any other settler, but I definitely am tracking that this is all predicated on not just the power of the state, but assumptions about how people treat each other. And what I have experienced is that is not how people who have been harmed in such a way actually have treated me. There's been just a tremendous amount of patience and grace shown to me. And very often it's not awkward until many years later and I realize how uninformed I was. So, yeah, I think that I guess I'm curious, where does it leave you with land acknowledgements?
I'll continue to do them, and I hope continue to have conversations with people, beyond them. So it's like, my idea of like acknowledging the land. So there's the protocol of like speech and speaking and how you open and close a gathering that has policy implications and these kinds of like power conversations. Yeah. I'll keep doing those, and I'll keep hopefully attending to when I'm receiving that information rather than delivering it, like how to try to make sure that happens in a responsible way. But for me, my own acknowledgement of collapse of settler colonialism, of the impacts of my ancestors accepting the bribes of whiteness, to me it's about like remembering where the water comes from and what temperature it actually is. Like part of my land acknowledgement every day is to like feel cold water, to know where water actually comes from, and to like allow myself to be a little shocked or frozen by that, and to try to strengthen my capacity to know how to like be present to the living systems, both that are impacted by modernity, like in an urban environment where I usually live, and when I'm out in these less less concretized landscapes, that it becomes, I guess, slightly smoother or easier sometimes, but to just acknowledge the weather, the seasons, what is growing, what is not, how and why material is here, which is to say plastic, rogue machines or vehicles, food, where does the food come from? What hands, what lands made it possible to come to me? Those types of remembrances is like, my little brain can only hold so much complexity and so much contradiction, but it's trying to like exercise that muscle to be able to lift heavier and heavier truth of that.
I'm really struck. I like this notion of like my brain can only hold so much complexity. And I'm the contradiction in me. It's so interesting right now because I can feel within me the self. So, okay, here's my story of learning about residential schools. So I had this friend when I was in first year at UVic, trying to, and he was a much older man, in his 40s by then, and his name was John Paul Jones, and he was Cowichan, and I grew up on Cowichan lands, and so I remember he was in the school of social work, and I just want to like send some compassion to my like 18-year-old self. Okay, I was probably 17 actually because I'd moved out, and this was anyway. John Paul Jones, becoming a good friend. He's in the same program as my roommate, who's in the school of social work. They're all older than me, and he says, "Where did you go to school?" And I said, "I went to school at Shawnigan Lake School. It's a private school." He said, "Oh, I know the school. I went to a private school too." And I was like, "Oh, where did you go?" And he said, "Oh, up in," and it was like someplace near Port Alberni. It was Port Alberni is an Indian residential school. I'd never heard of it. And I was like, "No, I know all the private schools." God, I'm so embarrassed. I know all the private schools on the island, and we played field hockey against them. I would have known. And he was like, "Oh no, there was a school there. It was a residential school, and it was the Indian school." And I was like, no. I can't even go. I feel sick right now to my stomach that I was like, that wasn't a thing. So John Paul Jones, just a gigantic. He was a very large, bear-shaped man, and it was very distressing for him. He started off kind of light, of course, and like joking. And then when I was like, no, that wasn't a real school. Anyway, I did not know about residential schools. It was very distressing for him. And Tara explained it to me over dinner that night, my roommate, about like, there was, and I was like, but I would have known about that. And she's like, no, you didn't, for a reason. I can feel the me then inside me as we're talking about this. And there's still a lot of people who don't know or are in denial or just like have not had any relationship with Indigenous peoples. I went to school in Duncan where, like, still in Duncan, you can go into, there's this restaurant, it's a diner from the 1950s called the Doghouse Restaurant. Just sounds unpalatable totally. But if you go in, half the room is couch and sweaters and the other half isn't, but it's like very integrated. So I went to a very integrated school. Then you move to Victoria, like the name, right? You move to Victoria an hour away and it's segregation. It's absolutely segregation. And so most people do not have an Indigenous friend. Most people are not going to places, except for, I hear what you're saying. There's kids in certain areas that are getting land acknowledgements every day. But, I have so much compassion for me that's in me that didn't know those things. And I have so much embarrassment about it. I like myself as a person for just having to change, to learn and change my mind. And so the thought of being like, we're only going to do land acknowledgements in certain places of power. Those are places where people have some kind of formal or even informal role power. That's not what's important to me. It actually is important that, like, the kids, as you're saying, like, have a sense of what's happening. And it's so typical that it's just becoming a checkbox. But I can feel the contradiction of, like, I don't want you to take my settler identity away from me. I don't want you to take this learning tool away, or I don't want it to only go into the hands of people who, quote unquote, have levers, because I had a lot of power as a 17-year-old white girl to absolutely destabilize and disarm this poor 40-year-old Indigenous man who's like just trying to talk to me, and I was so ignorant. And I'm not saying it would have been any better if I would have had a different attitude. I was raised in a very racist household, but the erasure of that, or that erasure of whiteness as an identity, I think a healthy shame about that I didn't know and nobody taught me. And so it still feels very needed to me. It's like, it's kind of like an elite conversation to have. What is the utility of land acknowledgements in a way? Because it's like, a lot of people still don't know or deny, and most people do not have, most white people, I should say, do not have a living relationship with a single Indigenous person in this country. Like, it is bonkers to think that. But I come to this town and I'm like, wow, that is 100% true. Yeah. This is Indigenous land. I have not seen an Indigenous person in all of Summerland. Like, it's that bad. It's still the reserve system. It's that bad. Yeah. And so I feel the like panic inside me of like, no, there's still so much to do around land acknowledgement. So that's a contradiction, because I hear what you're saying, that there's a numbing, but also it sort of foments the bitterness of feeling what the conservatives would call like shaming whiteness, or shaming people for, who they are, etc. And it's like, I am definitely very concerned about the numbing quality of it, or the sense of just like it's some kind of civic obligation.
About having, it's like, I've had the acknowledgement and now I can go on to have the experience of this event. Like,
right.
It's still always coming back to the like entitlement to like having, to property, to like my experience, my identity, my stuff, which our language of English necessitates the having and the owning, and all of the relationships are around property.
Yeah.
So it's not, well, it's no wonder.
You notice that probably, especially, I guess people listening wouldn't realize you study Scottish Gaelic. So we have this
extremely novice, but
well,
yes,
but still, but like you have an experience of people racialized as white who have a language that is absolutely oriented differently. I don't have necessarily a feeling, but a feeling is placed upon me in that language.
Or in proximity.
Yeah.
And right. It isn't, yeah, and I can only understand that on the most introductory level, because I am not in fluency and I'm not in the place where the language is native or like of the land, where the logics of the language are in relationship to place and to communicating where and how we get where we're going together. That is like how the language functions.
Is created.
Trying to stretch my imagination into other orientations to place through learning like language that not very many people speak on purpose, which is a tiny way to grow that muscle. So when I meet and encounter and even just consume information, as I have done with Kelsalam and other Indigenous, media makers, that when I hear them speaking their languages, I have a felt sense of how difficult it is to try to dispel English sounds from our mouths, from the architecture of our bodies, to make other sounds, and then to convey meaning and to get to the point of fluency, or at least proficiency in a language that has been intentionally removed and colonized, that those languages can persist and that people can do the uncomfortable work of trying to wrap your mouth around these sounds that want to be in you and want to be spoken, and like how the land can respond differently to those languages being used. That I have a felt sense of empathy of how difficult it is.
Yeah. Oh God, when people do a land acknowledgement in their language,
or welcome,
or a welcome, having tried to learn a little bit of Gaelic through singing, it seems superhuman, and trying to remember when people around you that we've all forgotten, and it's being absolutely purposely again like displaced, is I just find that's such a huge effort. Again, pretty elite conversation here, Sariani. This is, I appreciate it. Yeah, I think we have to keep it in the foreground that land acknowledgements are, I mean, put very simply, they're not just here to make us feel good. They're also not here to make us feel bad. They're here to put us in relationship.
That's right.
Right? And I think, being an attachment-based network, I think we're all sort of doing our best to recognize that we are political actors everywhere we are, even if we're like, oh, I'm just here for embodied attachment today. It's like, yeah, well, that's in a context, as you say. It's like on Zoom. It's enabled by the internet. It's enabled by tech. I think all of those things are happening at the same time. And I appreciate the opportunity to like be in the contradiction and the complexity with you. I hate to dogleg, but Ruben's like probably going to have coffee ready for us. We should go. But I also want to say, we're coming up on 5 years in the nuanced network. We're going to shift into our pitch here. Okay, I'm going to do my best. You as host are going to help me. Well, we're going to try to do a promo code so that people who want to try out the nuanced network can do so for the month of April. Why do you think? Well, maybe start with like very quickly, what's the nuanced network done for you?
It has really honed my skills of coping with collapse, with illness, with relational conflict, and it's been a place for me to learn very necessary skills around like the therapeutic tremor. I mean, there's a lot of, just generally somatics and, let's all do a box breath together, which can only go so far. Like the technology of the therapeutic tremor has been a very game-changing skill for me to cope with challenging, like in these 5 years, I haven't had more or less challenge than in the 5 years preceding, but I have more ways of responding. I feel like I have more choice of how I can proceed with the challenges that I'm faced with, both communication and physiologically, when I begin to experience fight or flight, I am aware of what that is, and I feel like I have more chances to respond to that. And that spiritually, I feel that the ways that I've learned about animism and about anti-colonial ritual have allowed me to access a sense of belonging and responsibility to my past and future ancestors that allow me to do the hard and necessary work.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's like pretty big work. Just for coming to some calls. That sounds great. The therapeutic tremor, just for people who are like just parachuting into this totally adjacent, have no idea what it is. We have it's like a somatic session that happens 5 or 6 times a week, and it's fully drop-in, and we teach you how to allow fight or flight to be discharged through your body by shaking. But some people don't. It can be a voluntary shake, but we start off with moving the body, gentle fatiguing, etc. And then it's a laying down on the ground or sitting, but usually laying down, and just allowing the shaking to move through your body. And some people it's like really vigorous. I have a very like kind of big obvious tremor, and other people it's just like a trembling inside.
That's right.
But it's what all mammals will do when you're like, holy crap, look what just happened, Oh, here comes Ruben. Okay, I guess we're closing up because this is coffee still on?
The barista has left the building.
The barista's left the building. Okay, I guess that's it. Thank you for a great conversation, Alysha.
Thank you.
And
Thanks, Ruben.
Oatmeal on the stove. Thank you, Ruben.
I'll come down to the barn soon.